Hi, it's Tom Moran from the Star Ledger Editorial Board. I'm here with the Democratic candidate for governor, Assemblyman John. What is the pronunciation of your last name? I hear it 6 different ways. Let's get it on record.
3 simple syllables. Wisniewski.
Wisniewski, not Wisniewski, you people out there. All right, let's start with Bridgegate. The Assemblyman was the committee chairman whose subpoena broke the scandal open by revealing the infamous email time for traffic problem in Fort Lee. Kelly and Bill Baroni both face sentencing tomorrow. Prosecutors are seeking 3 years. That seems excessive to me since they didn't gain anything personally from this. What do you think?
Well, I think they need to have some time, and I'll let the prosecutors and the judge decide that. I think in contrast to what we recently saw with the chairman of the Port Authority, I mean, clearly house arrest is insufficient to send a signal that this kind of behavior is not permitted and shouldn't be condoned. And so, and I don't believe that they'll get the full amount that the prosecution is asking for. There'll probably be some intermediate step that the judge will pick. And
You'd be happy with that. You're unhappy with the Sampson getting basically no punishment.
House arrest in his mansion in South Carolina doesn't sound much like punishment.
If Baroni and Kelly got a few months, 3 months, say, in jail, would that satisfy you?
I think something around a year probably would be satisfactory.
Okay. Did the governor, in the end, do you believe the governor lied about his role in this?
I believe the governor lied about his role.
How do you know that?
Can't prove it, but if you understand how a governor's office works in New Jersey, and you understand how this governor works, with an unprecedented level of micromanagement, where, you know, as a committee chair, I try to get commissioners to come and the governor stops them. It's hard to imagine in any way, shape, or form that what happened here was not sanctioned at the highest levels. And we heard testimony to that effect at the federal trial. Nobody said the governor told me to do this, but the implication from all the testimony was clearly that the governor and his highest advisors were involved in this.
There were 5 people who testified under oath that they spoke to him about the possible political motive behind this. He said January 9th to the state, I was blindsided. That was the first I heard of that. That struck me as evidence of a lie. 3 of those people were close allies of his. So why doesn't the legislature reconvene this committee and call those 5 people up and say, hey, you're saying the governor's lying?
I would love to do that. Unfortunately, a single assemblyman or a senator can't convene a legislative committee like this. We need legislative leadership. We need to do resolutions. And so far, legislative leadership has been very resistant.
You've asked?
I've asked repeatedly.
And so in the Assembly, that's Assembly Speaker Vinnie Prieto, and in the Senate President Steve Sweeney. Neither of them have agreed to that?
Correct. They just don't want to pick this up again.
Okay. Let's talk about the fiscal crisis. New Jersey just had its, what, 10th or 11th credit downgrade?
So far, we're counting it's 11.
Okay. Yet you're advocating an expensive list of new initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
Fully funding education, which hasn't been done in forever.
10 years.
Yeah. Tuition-free college for families under $125,000. Single-payer health care system. That seems a bit reckless.
No, it's not reckless. These are investments. And I think one of the problems we have with New Jersey, especially under this governor has followed the Newt Gingrich-inspired philosophy of starving the beast. Let's just cut government revenue. Let's make sure the programs that we have don't work. Then let's point at the programs and say, here's evidence that education doesn't work. Here's evidence that our transportation system doesn't work, and demand further cuts. The reality is if we fully fund education, we provide immediate property tax relief for so many homeowners in New Jersey who have been looking for it for years. If we make the investment in our colleges by providing free college tuition, we're talking about families at $125,000 or less. We're means testing it, we're not saying everybody, but that provides an economic boost for our economy because those families that are either taking those resources and investing in college or getting those student loans won't have to do that, and that spurs economic growth.
So where would you cut spending?
Well,
we have room for that kind of investment.
Well, we have to cut the waste that we've seen in the corporate welfare, what I would call corporate welfare. We have spent in the last 7 years approximately $7.5 billion. And these are well-intentioned programs. I won't say that the programs aren't well-intentioned, but in practice they don't deliver what they promised. For instance, if you average out the cost per job created, we're spending somewhere north of $100,000 for each job created, and we're creating jobs that pay on average about $50,000. So from a business proposition, we're spending more than we're getting.
My understanding is that money, the $7 billion you talk about, is committed but not yet spent. That's over the next several years. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, but here's, this is great Trenton or Washington math. When you give away tax revenue, you're spending. It's not like it's free money. Right. And there are a number of my colleagues who would argue that we could do this all day long because it's not costing us anything. The reality is it is. and that money can be used for the things that I'm talking about, because investing in our K-12 system, investing in our colleges, creates the workforce. And we have to recognize that companies come to New Jersey for the location. We have great access to 2 big markets, but also because of our enormous human capital and the potential that it offers. We have a very well-educated workforce, and that's because of the investments we've made so far. We can't walk away from that investment and expect to keep all of those jobs here.
We've signed contracts with these companies that made investments in the state to provide those tax benefits. How do you say we're going to break that deal?
Well, we're not going to continue to go forward with it.
But the $7 billion is already committed.
Well, but we haven't policed them also. Remember, they get the money, or they get the tax breaks, and then they have to create jobs, and they have to maintain those jobs and maintain that investment. The problem we have with these programs is that there's nobody monitoring them, and so once this deal is in place, there's really
I get the
it's a free
criticism,
giveaway.
John. My only point is,
Sure.
this money's committed. How do you finance these investments with money that we've already committed to give these companies? We signed contracts.
But if they're not living up to it, and most of them aren't,
You could break
we
it.
could break the contracts.
Okay. Are there other places you would cut spending more traditionally in government programs? And I want to ask first and foremost, would you reduce public worker benefits, health benefits, or pension benefits?
I wouldn't reduce their pension benefits. I mean, this is an agreement that, you talk about breaking agreements. So we have agreements with public employees that you work, we take a deduction out of your paycheck every 2 weeks, and then when you retire, you get deferred income.
Well, how about going forward? Say we're going to offer you a different deal, or new hires a different deal, and I'm even more interested in the healthcare side of that equation.
Sure. So going forward, clearly, if we need to make adjustments for new hires, we should look at that. That has to be something that has to be on the table. But we can't walk away from promises made. And one of the things that I'm talking about is a single-payer healthcare system. And when we look at that and we bring in so many people into one system and we cut the excess that costs, each physician in New Jersey on average is spending over $100,000 a year in compliance costs because of the system we have now. We have the lowest quartile of satisfaction among current physicians in New Jersey of anywhere in the world because of our healthcare system. We have to change that. And we could save money by bringing that all under one single-payer system. We would cut overhead. We would have economies of scale. We would have marketing clout to reduce pharmaceutical costs. It would make our healthcare system much cheaper.
I've looked over your website and all your public comments. I haven't found a single example where you have proposed a significant spending cut.
I have talked about, I talked about the corporate welfare.
But that's would be, in fact, a tax change. But I get it. You can consider it an expenditure. But what else?
You and I have to disagree because this is one of the problems with government. People propose tax incentives, which essentially are spending.
Okay.
But they're not considered spending by a vast majority.
Okay,
And so
fair
what
point.
happens is we wind up with budget problems.
Education. It looks to me like you're endorsing every position of the teachers union. Is that right?
I don't know that I've endorsed every position, but a lot of things they've talked about I agreed with.
Okay. Fully funding the formula, which many people would do. How much would that cost, and how would you pay
It
for it?
would be another $1.6 billion.
That's a whopper, right? That's out of a
That's-
$35 billion budget. 1.6 billion is a
$36 billion budget. Yeah.
$9 billion in education. So that's from $9 billion to another 1.6. So that's a huge cost.
Right. Well, don't forget, we just gave away $1 billion a year in the estate tax, which was a huge mistake. And in the first budget year, I think we're losing about $200 million or more. We cut 1/8 of the sales tax, 1/8 of a penny off the sales tax, which, it sounds, oh, you're giving away a sales tax cut, but for the average consumer, 1/8 of a penny is almost not noticeable. But for the state of New Jersey, it comes out to $300 or $400 million.
Okay.
And so we need to recapture some of those things if we're going to make the investment. I think the fundamental difference that I have with some other candidates is that we're not going to make the economy stronger and increase our tax revenue in New Jersey if we're not making the investment in the things that we have historically for the past 7 years not made investments in.
Okay. You've come out in favor of a moratorium on new charter schools and a freeze on that. If charters are so bad, why do parents in Newark and Camden continue to flock to them and state preferences and sign up their children to get in?
Sure. Well, because there is a philosophy that choice is a good thing, and I'm not suggesting that they're not looking out for the best interests of their children, but let's recognize what charters create. Charters create segregated schools. The population of charter schools in many cases don't look like the population of the school district from where they're coming.
You've got to be kidding with that line. I don't understand
It's
that
true.
line. New Jersey schools, public schools, are intensely segregated.
And then you
The charters-
sub-segregate them further. I mean,
Okay,
that's,
I'm just not seeing that in the record, the factual record on charters in Newark.
Newark's not the only town that has charters, though.
Newark and Camden have about 80% of them, something like that.
But I mean, the problem is we're creating segregated schools, and we're taking money out of the public education system. And so, talking about the model that Republicans love to have is, let's have the system fail. So let's take money out of the public education system, and then let's point at it and say it's not doing its job. Well, when you're taking those dollars out, it's going to become harder. And we have to recognize that charters don't take all comers, and so they have an unfair advantage when you're comparing it to a regular school system.
Well,
let me
that's
be
not
clear.
true. In Newark and in Camden, both, they do take all comers. They are assigned them by neighborhood in Camden, and in Newark, as you know, they are assigned through a central system. And that's, as I say, the bulk of the charter experience in New Jersey.
But let me be clear about it. Charter schools, Joe Doria was the legislator who started the charter experiment, a big proponent of public education. He viewed them as an opportunity to create innovation and take that innovation and apply it to the public school system. Somewhere along the way, we stopped doing that, and they become standalone public schools within a public school system, using public revenue, but not operating like a public school. And so, if we can find a way to get back to that original concept, that these are going to become laboratories of innovation, we're going to use them to take the lessons learned and apply it to public schools, there's a role to be played by charters. But right now, when you look at, for instance, the recent State Board of Education rule changes, which seem to be a gradual morphing of the charters to allow private interests to get involved and essentially open the door to privatization of public schools. I'm opposed to that.
All right. For the record, in New Jersey, there are no for-profit charter schools.
Not yet, no.
Have you? Right. And have you? When you say the charters are not a laboratory experiment to help the mainstream, that's precisely what Newark Superintendent Chris Surf says is happening in Newark. They're enriching the total portfolio of offering to kids, and they've achieved good results. Have you looked at the results? But they
haven't taken those. I mean, the problem is they haven't taken those experiments and applied them to the school system.
Okay, well, that's exactly what Chris Surf says he's been doing. But anyway, last question: you've called for the end of the park testing?
Yeah.
I talked to a woman at the state hearing this, a mother in Newark, who said, "I need this standardized testing. Otherwise, we'll go back to the days where Newark's education was much less than what was offered in the suburbs, and there's no factual basis to show parents that." To show them that, hey, your kid in your math class is learning how to balance a checkbook. The other kid in the suburbs is learning algebra.
Right.
And there's no standard ruler. If you get rid of the park test, don't you lose that?
No, we need a standardized test. We don't need the park test. Remember, what's happened in education is, and you hear this complaint across the spectrum, that teachers are now educating their students for the park test, not to follow the curricula. And so the goal has become test-driven as opposed to results-oriented. We all had standardized tests. There were California achievement tests. There were a whole variety of things during my career in public schools. Those were useful as benchmarks to see how the students are performing, and we need to have those. But the park test has been, first of all, started out with, I think, 26 states. I think it's down to about 6. And so states are voting with their feet, moving away from it, because of its overemphasis on success on the test as opposed to success in the classroom. Okay. So we do need standardized testing. I think park is the wrong answer.
Okay. Well, there you have it. That's a bite of the view of New Jersey from Assemblyman not John Wisniewski. No, not John Wisniewski, but yes, John Wisniewski.
Even Tom Moran sometimes can get it wrong.
Thank you for facing this. Appreciate it, John.
My pleasure.